Motherhood is challenging and rewarding, and it's time we discuss the truth about motherhood, our own feelings and desires, why we mom shame, and how we can start standing together. Motherhood is a lifetime of different phases, all while we are expected to manage the weight of life. It's time for us moms to not only help each other by giving a hand, but push each other to explore ourselves on our deepest levels. Welcome to the Mom Still Standing podcast. I'm your mom friend and host, Danielle Lewis. Each week, we will chat with a beautiful mom who is navigating motherhood and life in a special way. My goal, moms, is for us to understand we are more alike than we are different and that we shouldn't mom alone. So join us as we celebrate and honor motherhood. Now go grab your favorite beverage and let's dive in. Welcome, mom friends, to another episode of the Mom Still Standing podcast. And to conclude the month of February, I can't believe that March is next week, but to close out February, which is the Love Month and also Heart Health Awareness Month, I want to talk about teen dating violence because most people probably don't realize this. February is also Teen Dating Violence Month. Last week, I had the pleasure of interviewing Joy Forrest, who runs the nonprofit called To Peace, and we talked a little bit about domestic abuse, the signs, and how women can be supported through it. But this episode is a little different in that we will really be focusing on our youth, specifically teens. And it's really a big issue, y'all. And it's important to me that I bring awareness to my mom friends on this issue. So I have with me today, Brianna Clark-Schwelm with InterAct. Welcome to the show, Brianna.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Brianna is the Director of Training, Education, and Prevention at InterAct. So, Brianna, can you tell us a little bit more about your role and then the Youth Education Services Program?
Sure. So, InterAct is Wake County's only provider of comprehensive services for survivors of domestic and sexual violence. And I'm sure a lot of people in our community know that InterAct is a place for survivors to go in their moments of crisis. But what a lot of people might not know is that InterAct also has a heart for prevention. And so that's really what I focus on and what my team focuses on. I oversee a team of 3 education specialists that actually go all over Wake County to lead violence prevention curriculum for really 3rd grade through 12th grade in our schools, and then also with college-age students. So we're really deeply entrenched across the community, talking about teen dating violence and talking about healthy relationships with young people.
Great. And so, wow, you're starting as young as the 3rd grade. What is their comprehension level regarding this topic, though?
Oh, it's actually really remarkable. We know that getting in early with young people is really critical for their longer-term relationships when they're older. So if we're only talking to young people about healthy relationship skills and knowledge when they're 16, 17 years old, then it's too late. We have to start building these pools of knowledge and skills when they're young. So with 3rd graders, 4th, 5th, we're talking about healthy communication and how to play well with others, how to respect other people who are different from you, how to handle your emotions. When you're angry, what do you do with that emotion? How do you communicate that? And that really creates the platform for them to develop healthy friendships, which is really how they practice all of those healthy relationship tools and skills that they need in order to have those healthy dating relationships when they're older.
Wow, that's definitely a good approach. So I noticed that you also said that InterAct is Wake County's only comprehensive organization. What exactly does that mean?
Great question. So we are an organization that works with survivors across their lifetime. So from the moment of crisis, they can call us. We have a 24-hour crisis line in English and in Spanish. They can walk through our doors without an appointment, and they can just come in and see a crisis counselor immediately. We also work with survivors who are out of that immediate crisis moment and want to work with a case manager to really focus on rebuilding their lives. We have court services, so not only can they file for domestic violence protective orders here in-house, they can electronically do that and video chat with a judge to get that granted. But we also have advocates who work with survivors when they have to go to court itself. We have a shelter, which can provide a safe space to rebuild after emergency for 45 individuals, women and children. And we really do work with those individuals from the moment that they are in crisis until the moment that they're ready to move into their own home and, have all the pieces in place to live their own lives independently. And then, of course, actually, a piece I completely left out is the Solace Center, which is so important. That is North Carolina's first and only community-based sexual assault medical forensic examination center. So that is the place where survivors of sexual assault go, and they would receive care from a trained forensic nurse as well as a trained volunteer called a sexual assault response advocate to go through the process of getting a sexual assault kit done. So when we say comprehensive services, we really mean it. It's wraparound care for these individuals who are experiencing violence. And we take our mission, which is to save lives, rebuild lives, and secure safer futures. We take it very, very seriously. And all of our programs seek to do that for survivors of sexual and domestic violence.
Thank you so much for giving us the details of that. When you were saying that, it's almost like one-stop shopping when you come to InterAct.
Yes, that is exactly what it is. I love that. We also are a co-located model. So not only does InterAct provide all of these, the one-stop shop from InterAct's perspective, but we also have partners under this roof. So we have all these other agencies that are able to support our clients as they seek services from some of the other areas related to the experience that they're going through.
Very good. So as I was telling my listeners, February is Teen Dating Violence Month. And I'm sure, like I said, most people have never really heard of that or knew that was such a thing. So can you tell us exactly what is teen dating violence?
Sure. Yeah, and I'm really appreciative that you're highlighting this because you're absolutely right. We give presentations in the community all the time. We work with educators, we work with parents, with faith communities, really everyone, and people don't know that teen dating violence is an issue. Oftentimes when we imagine abuse, we think of older relationships and don't realize that so much of this does start when people enter into their first romantic relationship or a first relationship at all. So we know that 1 in 3 youth, and when we talk about youth, we're primarily talking about 13 to 19-year-olds. We know that 1/3 of that age group experiences some form of physical, sexual, emotional, and or verbal abuse within their dating relationship. And so that's very high. That's actually comparable to adult relationships. And that is across both all gender, the entire gender spectrum. We know that that is across all identities, all racial groups, socioeconomic groups. So when we look at high schools, when we look at middle schools, we know that that experience is being had by so many of those students. And it's so important for us to elevate this issue because the people who are serving those young people, those teachers and parents, we have to be present for those youth as they're experiencing these things. We have to be available to them and really know what we're talking about when we say teen dating violence.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And you raise a good point about knowing how to be present. And I have some questions regarding, really how to support someone, whether it's your child or a neighbor or someone in your church body that is a young person that may be experiencing teen dating violence. So you did talk a little bit about the forms of abuse, physical, emotional, sexual. Is one more prominent than the other, or the numbers for all of them just as high?
So we do know that when we talk about all of the different forms of abuse that an individual might experience in a romantic relationship, we often put it in the form of a pyramid. And at the bottom of that pyramid, we would put verbal abuse because this is something that happens the most often, and with that, emotional abuse. And so those are the two that are most common in relationships and don't always escalate to physical violence, whether sexual or physical violence, which are, sort of considered more dangerous to the person and their health. So that is more common, but oftentimes emotional and verbal abuse goes unnoticed by others. And so, or it's not taken very seriously. Whereas physical and sexual violence, it's less common, but we often see the bruises. We see when someone goes into a hospital or when they come to us with bruises on their body or broken arms, we know that that's happening. And so it is more common. It's all, I'll say that it all happens. I don't want to elevate one over another because with young people, they experience all forms of these abuse. And even though we see the bruises of physical and sexual violence, it doesn't mean that there aren't bruises that come from those verbal and emotional relationships as well. They just aren't physically shown.
Right, a good point. And I think a lot of times with the emotional abuse, and sometimes with the verbal abuse, sometimes the victim doesn't even realize that it's abuse.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. You are spot on there. And especially when we talk about teens, we often go into classrooms and talk about some of the red flags, and teenagers' eyes will light up because they realize that's happening in their relationship, their friendships even, and they didn't realize that that's not normal or that's not healthy. And so it's so important to have conversations with young people about what a healthy relationship does look like in addition to what it doesn't look like, because they often don't know that what they're experiencing in those emotionally and verbal abusive relationships, they don't necessarily know that that's considered abuse and that that's not something that they have to put up with.
So what would you say are some of the red flags or warning signs?
Well, with young people, we always want to talk about technology. So this is something that younger generations are dealing with in a way that older generations just haven't had. And so we're still learning about it. But cyber stalking and incessant texting and calling, abusing each other through social media, whether that means insulting one another or having multiple Instagram accounts so that you can stalk someone or really just say horrible things to them, or really just manipulate them and control them from many, many accounts. These are things that we hear young people talking about. It's not just examples coming from online research or statistics. This is happening in Wake County. This is happening in Raleigh public schools. We know that young people are more likely to threaten self-harm if they are the perpetrator in an abusive relationship. And so that's a red flag that we often elevate for or highlight for young people that we might not always talk about with older relationships. But a lot of the red flags are the same as what we talk about with any abusive relationship. So that controlling behavior, that jealousy, that quick involvement, really, of course, always looking for that verbal abuse. Are they insulting their partner in public? Are they insulting their partner on social media? Are they accusing their partner of things that are not founded in reality? There are actually really wonderful quizzes online for young people. One that I really love is on loveisrespect.org. And so I can name so many red flags, but the relationships that young people experience are just as multifaceted as the relationships that adults experience. And so what abuse looks like for one young person might look different for another. And so I don't want to, if for any young person listening or parent listening who might be concerned, I think going online and finding one of those longer lists or taking a quiz like the one on loveisrespect.org, those are such good ways to sort of test what you're thinking and see if the signs that you're looking at align with some of the red flags that are more common in an abusive relationship.
Right. And I think where sometimes it may get tricky, especially for girls, is that like if the guy is always texting you or he wants to know where you are or like he's following you on social media persistently, like sometimes we feel that makes us feel good, honestly. And so sometimes we're like, well, I just thought he really cared or he really loved me. I didn't really look at it like it was abuse or like it was a problem until it hits another point. So I don't know if you hear young girls saying that too, or feeling like, oh, I just thought that meant that he was really interested or that he really loved me because he was doing those things.
Yeah, and that's something that both young girls and young boys experience with technology, having these phones. You know, the relationships that we see are some of the gender roles that were more set in stone with prior generations. They're more fluid now, and young people are absolutely experiencing violence no matter their sex, no matter their gender orientation. And so either way, no matter who you are, there is absolutely a feeling that a lot of young people say, you know, he loves me or she loves me or they love me, and I feel so special because they care about me. They care about where I am and want to make sure that I'm safe, and they always want to know what I'm doing. And for someone who possibly hasn't had that kind of attention before, that does feel special. And what we always try to highlight for the students in our classes is the difference between stalking and harassment and flirting and harassment. And it is sometimes hard for them to see the line, but a lot of this is also subjective. So if one person in their relationship, they have talked about how much they want to communicate, they know each other's boundaries, and they do want to be in constant communication, that is a boundary that they can set. But if they've set a boundary with their partner where they don't want to be in constant communication and their partner doesn't respect that, that's where you know that it's crossing a line and that it's getting into harassment or stalking or abusive patterns. So a lot of this is about communication for young people to be aware that they shouldn't assume that their partner is doing this out of love, and they shouldn't assume that they're doing this out of abuse or a controlling mindset. They should really talk to their partner and see if they can have that open communication, because that's how you set boundaries in a dating relationship as a teen and as an adult too. This is advice for really any age group. And teens don't always have those conversations early.
Right. And
sometimes they don't have them or think to have them until it's later on. And some of those other more controlling patterns are starting to come up.
Mm-hmm. So one of the other things that I wanted to ask is, how often do you see that if a child or a young person comes from an abusive background, say their parents have a very abusive relationship, like, are there any statistics on if you come from that kind of background that you're more prone to engage or enter into a relationship that's abusive?
So I don't have this exact statistic on that, but we do talk about the cycle of abuse quite often, because we know that young people who are in homes that are experiencing domestic violence are more likely to either experience domestic violence as a perpetrator or a victim in their future. And we also know that with teen dating violence, we know that young people who experience intimate partner violence in their adolescence are more likely to experience intimate partner violence in their adult years. This is absolutely true, especially I don't have the statistic on me, but I do know that when we look at sexual assault specifically, that sexual assault victimization in adolescence or in high school increases the risk of sexual assault victimization in college. So these are connected to later experiences. And that's one of the reasons it's so important anyways to try to keep young people from entering into abusive relationships in their teenage years. But we also know that if a teenager experiences violence when they're young, they're more likely to experience violence throughout their lifetime. And if we can break that cycle of violence early, whether it's because they're experiencing that violence in their own relationship or they're experiencing their violence at home, then that's what we want to do. And that's really what we talk about here when we think about prevention and when we think about breaking that cycle of violence across Wake County for individuals, no matter their age group and no matter what form of violence they're experiencing.
And I know you also mentioned, so there's teen dating violence in romantic relationships, but how much do you see teen dating violence with just friendships? And I don't mean to single out girls, but sometimes girls can be mean to each other. And so I'm wondering how often you see that.
Yeah, I don't know if InterAct, we might have some young people call our crisis lines when they're experiencing friendship violence or interpersonal violence in their peer groups or friends circles. But when we're in classrooms and we're teaching to students from 3rd grade to 12th grade, we have people talk about friends. It is not only about romantic relationships. And of course, Teen Dating Violence Month, in February, we talk a lot about what romantic relationships look like. But friendships that is absolutely where young people test their skills, test their knowledge, and practice having healthy relationships. And that's a foundation for future romantic relationships. But it's also so important. We all know how important friendships are in our life. Even if you're married and you have kids and you're 50 years old, having friendships is important. And so we talk about the concepts that we talk about in classrooms. We talk about healthy communication and respect and conflict resolution. And those are all things that we all do with our girlfriends. When we talk about cyber abuse, a lot of the examples that we get are bullying from friends or peers or even strangers that wouldn't necessarily fall under this definition of teen dating violence, but absolutely is connected, and many of the same red flags exist.
Thank you for mentioning it. I'm glad I asked that question. So to shift a little bit, How can friends help other friends? And then most importantly, as it relates to my audience, how can parents really help their children when they suspect that their child may be in an unhealthy relationship or even friendship?
Yeah. So parts of the answer I'm going to give are the same for both of those groups, and some are different because teens or peers are not the primary caregivers for their friends. And we absolutely want to empower them to be supportive people in their friends' lives. But if any teen recognizes that their friend is in an abusive relationship, they should really think about who they can talk to get advice from. And that's advice for all teenagers. Always be aware of what adults in your life are safe people, are people that you trust, whether that's your parent, whether that's your aunt, your teacher, your school counselor, maybe your coach. We all have someone different in our life who really feels safe and really feels like that person who we can trust with information. And so to a teen or to a young person who is witnessing abuse in a friend's relationship and they're worried for them, I would say the first thing is really to be sure that you feel safe approaching that person. Talk to your parent or talk to your adult safe person and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing in a friend and I really want to talk to them, but make sure that you go in with the resources that you know first. And then the first thing to really say to your friend is really to just be sure that that they're safe, that they aren't in any imminent danger, and then really to assure them that you are a trusted person who just loves them and wants to be there for them. Because if you're approaching someone who is in an abusive relationship, they might not know that they're in an abusive relationship. They might not be ready yet to talk about it, and they might feel a little defensive if you're approaching them to talk about that. So just being available and making sure that they know what their resources are, making sure they know that you're a safe person, making sure that they know that InterAct is here, that they could call our crisis line if they ever need to. That's so important. It creates a foundation of safety for that young person so that when they are ready to talk to someone or when they need to talk to someone, they know that they have that friend available and they've heard about some of the community resources like InterAct, and maybe they'll Google us and call us themselves. And for parents, it's a little different because they are the primary caretakers. And if they suspect violence in their kid's relationship, I would definitely talk to them about their options. Make sure that child understands that their parent is here for them, that they are ready to be a resource for them whenever they need them. A lot of young people don't necessarily feel comfortable telling their parent, and that's not necessarily the first person that they would go to. So doing some safety planning with your child, and sometimes that's not going to be super overt. You might not say, and now we're going to do safety planning, but making sure that your kid knows who the safe parents or the safe adults are in their life. Because if you're not the parent that they're going to go to first, make sure that they do have someone that they can talk to first. Make sure that they've thought that through. Make sure that they've thought through safety planning for when they're out on dates, for when they're maybe going to parties if they're a little older, for how they talk to people online and what those online relationships look like. Parents should really utilize the resources they have in our community. And one of those is InterAct. They can absolutely call us. They can connect their child to our peer educator program or to one of our youth education programs and try to get more educated for themselves and for their kid, but really being not only an example of healthy relationship skills and knowledge for that child and practicing those so that their kid knows what a healthy relationship looks like, but really creating an environment where their child knows if they are in trouble, they can talk to their parent and they have someone they can trust.
Wow, that was a lot of vital information that you shared. So I want to touch on a few things. In a recent conversation, I found out that good advocacy and good support is really not telling the other person what to do, but really providing them support and resources. And you mentioned that. But I just think out of habit and out of humanness, we automatically want to tell people, you should leave that person alone. Stop talking to them. Stop taking their calls. And you brought up a good point. The person A may not even realize that they're experiencing abuse, and they may not be ready to address it. So instead of taking that approach, it really is best to really provide them as much support, be a trusting friend, and get them resources, point them towards resources so they can begin to get educated on really what abuse is.
Absolutely. And all of us often think that leaving an abusive relationship is just one act. it's just leave them. Why don't you leave them? But asking someone why they don't leave really isn't the right question. We know that leaving is a process. And when we look at adult relationships, we know that it can take people many, many tries before they leave that relationship. And we really do need to take teen dating relationships just as seriously. That these relationships, maybe there aren't children involved, maybe they don't own property together, but these relationships are built on a foundation of love. And these teens, they love their partner. They don't want to leave their boyfriend or their girlfriend or their partner. They don't want to do that, especially if this is their first relationship. Maybe this is the first time someone has made them feel this special, this cared for. And, oh, what's a little abuse if I feel so special with this person? And so we really have to take everything that these young people are experiencing in their relationships just as seriously as we would an adult relationship. You're absolutely right. They might not be ready. They might not be safe. It might not be safe for them to leave that person, or they might not be prepared to leave that relationship safely. So safety planning and doing that a lot, not just once. Don't just have one conversation with your teenager or your friend about this. Bring these things up often so that teenager who's in an abusive relationship really does believe that you are going to be a consistent, safe place to go, that you're not going to leave them just because they've made a mistake. And really ensuring that those resources, if you say something once, they might not remember it, but if you all year long, all their whole lifetime, you reiterate all of the different places that they can turn, if they feel unsafe, all of the people who are resources, that InterAct is there, they can call the crisis line, that they deserve love, that nobody deserves to be abused. If you say these things over and over to them, maybe they'll start believing it, and maybe they'll start seeing what is happening in their own relationship for themselves.
Right, definitely. So you also mentioned when you were talking about the parent piece, safety planning is important. And so for a parent that just really has no clue about how to even begin safety planning, are there any resources at InterAct that could help a parent to put a plan in place for their children?
Yeah, absolutely. So really for any parent, a first step might be to Google safety planning, because there are a lot of safety planning tools out there that are primarily used for adult relationships, but there are a lot of questions that can still be very relevant for young people. And then we do have tools that we use specifically with young people around safety planning. And so much of that is about seeking out trusted adults. Young people are not always, they can't necessarily drive themselves around. They often live with someone else. They live with an adult. And we want to be sure that young people know who those key point people in their lives are, so that they're not moving through their abusive relationship in isolation, because isolation really is a weapon, a tool that perpetrators use against their partners. They try to isolate their partner so that eventually their partner doesn't believe anyone else will support them anymore or is there for them. So if we can consistently remind that abused partner, that victim, that they do have people in their life, that they do have people who love them and are there for them and will believe them if they come forward with a story about abuse, if we remind them that they are not alone, maybe they'll never get to that point of isolation where they don't feel like anyone is there for them and they will just continue on in that relationship. We really want to break that before it gets too serious. And we want young people to know that there are people who really do love them and value them and are there for them no matter what.
Yes, I definitely agree. So I have a question regarding privacy laws. And I ask this because I believe it's 14. Like if you take your child to the doctor at a certain age, they can opt to not have you in the room, or even the doctor can opt to not share certain information with the parent. And so with privacy laws being the way that they are, how involved can a parent be if their child is in an abusive relationship and the child or the teen seeks help from InterAct?
So there are a couple different avenues for a teen to seek services here. So the first would be our crisis lines. And our crisis lines are 24/7, and those are in English and in Spanish. And if a teen needs to call the crisis line, they can do that anytime, and it's confidential. And that would really be a resource to call for safety planning, for resources, just for guidance, to talk to someone if you're feeling scared or nervous, or you're not really sure what you're dealing with, or maybe you suspect that someone nearby, one of your friends, is in an abusive relationship. You can call that line and get advice. And then the other two would be coming here in person. So the first of those is the Solace Center. So the Solace Center is the Sexual Assault Forensic Examination Center. And in that space, we can see clients who are 16 years and older. So a 16 and 17-year-old can come to the Solace Center, but we do need parental consent. So they would need to bring their parent or guardian with them to go through that process. And then 18 and over, they can come on their own. Anyone under 16, we would send to our nearby partner hospital. For coming in and seeing a crisis counselor, anyone who is 16 and over can come in and talk to a crisis counselor without their parent. And anything that they say is entirely confidential, and their parent cannot request any information on their child. But anyone under 16, if they come in and they talk to someone, and we have seen clients who are under 16, some come in alone, infrequently, but we have had some come in on their own, or some come in with maybe their parent or another adult in their life, and they can see one of our crisis counselors alone. But if a parent requests their information, whatever information they gave during that visit, then we do have to give it to the parent if they are under 16 years old. And that's for crisis counseling. So it's a little different between the different spaces. And then, of course, we do, for all young people, if we ever suspect child abuse, we do have to put in North Carolina, everyone is a mandated reporter. And here we are definitely reporters, mandated reporters. So if we suspect child abuse, we will make that call to CPS. And so we do tell people that over the crisis line immediately. We say that first thing to people and want people to really understand what that means if they do report any child abuse.
Thank you for sharing that as well. And so I think you've basically touched on this last question that I have in different ways, but the question is, how can InterAct assist or provide support? And I know definitely bringing awareness through various programs. You have the 24-hour crisis line, the Solace Center, emergency shelter, court advocacy, and then youth education. Is there anything else that you want to say about the support that InterAct provides?
Yeah, just one more thing. One thing that we know, so my team, the Youth Education Services team, they go out into schools, nonprofits, church groups, and they teach this violence prevention curriculum. But we also have a really amazing program called the Peer Educator Program. And that's a peer-to-peer mentorship program where young people, ages 14 to 24, go out into the community and empower young people with the knowledge and skills they need to prevent teen dating violence, to enter into healthy relationships instead. And they do that with similar lessons to what we teach through our youth education services, but the difference is that it's coming from a young person. It's coming from a peer. So these young people, the peer educators, they are very well trained, very well versed in these issues, and they're able to give presentations to other people their age to talk about teen dating violence, boundaries, harassment and stalking, resisting peer pressure, and really what healthy relationships look like. And we know that that peer-to-peer mentorship is a really strong way to prevent teen violence, especially for young people that don't necessarily want to listen to adults. So if any young people out there are interested in these issues or want someone their own age to come and talk to them, they can reach out to us and either join our peer educator program. We would absolutely love that. Or request peer educators to come and talk to their youth group or their friend group or whomever. We are really, really open to being present in the community with that peer educator group.
Great. Very good information. So, Brianna, I just want to thank you and the others at InterAct for your commitment to ending the cycle of domestic and sexual violence here in Wake County. And thank you so much for joining us to share this vital information and to bring awareness to my mom friends on the topic of teen dating violence. Can you share how teens and parents and others that may be interested, how they can further connect with InterAct, whether it be website, the crisis line, or social media?
Absolutely. So our crisis line, which is, as I mentioned, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, that phone number is 919-828-7740. So we really encourage people to use that resource. And if anyone wants to look us up on Facebook, you can just put in InterAct, INTERACT. And on Twitter, we're InterAct_Wake, WAKE. On Instagram, we have 2 accounts. So our main account is InterAct of Wake. But if you want to follow our teen peer educator group, you can look for InterAct_teen. And of course, our website is www.interactofwake.org. So please connect with us, reach out, call our crisis line if you need support. We really want to hear from you and be there for you.
Yes. And one quick thing about your website, I was scrolling through your website this week, and when I initially got on the website, this message popped up and it said, if you need to leave quickly, you can press this button, and the button says escape. I think that's such an important feature because you never know when someone may be in a situation and reach out to InterAct, and then their abuser happens to come to the computer or see their phone. And what a way to instantly just remove yourself from the website so you don't appear to be seeking help. So kudos to you all for that feature.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's really important, and we are always trying to keep the safety of our clients in mind. And so even on that note, for anyone out there who needs to reach out to us, think about, what your own safety planning. Should you use a library computer to look at our website, or use someone else's phone maybe to make that call to our crisis line? Never put yourself in harm's way in order to reach out to us, but there are resources available to you in order to make your way here, and we desperately want to support you if that's what you need.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Brianna. And thank you, mom friends, for joining this episode of the Mom Still Standing podcast. Talk to you soon. Peace. Thank you, moms, for tuning into this week's episode of the Mom Still Standing podcast. Make sure you head over to iTunes and subscribe. If you found this episode to be informative and encouraging, please write a review so that we can continue to empower moms everywhere. In the meantime, remember, connected moms don't mom alone.